Good morning, everyone. I'm Frank Moore from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I'm with the Information Security Office there. This is Piyush Pandey with Deloitte. He's our project manager on that side of the group. Skip that. The purpose of our pilot was to deploy an online security identity solution for accessing government services. You'll see in a couple of slides how complex it can be at a state level. Pennsylvania has 40-plus agencies under the Governor's Office of Administration. We have numerous business areas in each of those agencies, and typically things are very, very siloed. We have multiple identity processes, multiple repositories. If I want to do business with the state, I have probably a dozen or more personas with the government. So we are looking to establish an identity exchange that will help break down some of those silos and work with private partners in trying to come up with a more reliable, more verifiable identity that a citizen can use across different areas that they need to deal with. So we're looking at streamlining and efficiencies in accessing online services, and also trying to reduce the fraud and false, stolen, outdated identities that we often see. This is, as I alluded to, the kind of current state. In the upper area there, on the where it says Compass application, that is our portal for the human services pieces of our government welfare department and other access insurance and so on. We have some agencies up there that are currently sharing IDs and enabling a citizen to move freely from one to the next. But the general state is everyone has their own thing, and within a given agency, the business units also have their own thing going. So it's pretty much all over the place. We have the multiple credentials. We have issues with data privacy and integrity because we're sharing this all over the place. Authentication is, again, you hit an agency, you get authenticated there. You go to some other agency or application, you get authenticated there as well. Authorization, again, left up to the agency or the business unit. And we have data that's being duplicated all over the place. Everyone's collecting the same information, and no one's sharing it. So our solution here is trying to break down those silos. On the left, you can see a user coming in. This is kind of a future state. We would like to start using outside identities, but for now it's a PA identity that we will be using, something that we call the Keystone Key. Coming into our to-be built identity exchange, where we will actually try and verify that identity against both internal and external sources, and then providing that identity to the plethora of state agencies and applications that we have out there. And
Okay. Thank you, Frank. So good morning, everyone, again. My name is Piyush Pandey. I'm a senior manager from Deloitte and helping Commonwealth of Pennsylvania build the solution. What I will be talking about in the next few slides is really a core component of this solution which we are building. And most of the components you are already familiar with. So starting from the top right, yep, it's our identity exchange component. And those who are familiar with the federal credential exchange system, it is more or less like that. It has a little bit more features or functionality than that. And I will briefly explain what those are. What this exchange solution does is it actually sits between the agencies, which are relying parties, and the identity providers who are on the left side of the architecture. And this actually facilitates the communication between the relying parties and the identity providers. And it also creates a layer of abstraction so that the relying party doesn't know who is providing the credentials, as well as identity provider cannot track back where the credentials are going. So more to kind of consider the privacy of the user, and especially talking about the state government agencies where they provide a lot of services around health and human services, and Department of Health provides certain services. So we want to make sure that there is no way user or any given entity be able to track what kind of services this user is trying to get from the agency, and kind of infer whatever that case may be. So this exchange solution actually does that. So it's more of an identity broker functionality. The second piece, what it does is it actually facilitates the communication between the identity providers and the attribute verifiers. So when the users come in first time to enroll, it actually takes user through the attribute verifiers, which are state-based attribute verifiers, such as driver's license, Department of Transportation, and some of the other agencies which host the authoritative source of user information. So we try to use that in the solution, and it's more of a waterfall type approach where once the user has failed to do the proofing using the internal sources, then we default them to the external sources. So Experian or any other entity which can provide the credential confirmation. So that's what the identity exchange does. Moving on to the right, and then below that, there was a relying party, so all the state agencies who actually provides the services to the citizens. So pretty straightforward. What we are proposing to do here is use the SAML assertion as an open token for the agencies to be able to consume and then map it to their local data sources. Attribute verifiers, we have state-based attribute verifiers. Right now we call them verifiers since we are not collecting the attributes from them. We are actually collecting the claims or assertion that this attribute is valid for this user, and we are storing that claim. So that's one of the difference between the attribute provider and verifier. So that's why we are calling them verifiers. Moving on to the governance, which is obviously a very important part of the overall solution. One of the agency, Office of Administration, is kind of overarching agency to provide the governance and standard services to all the Commonwealth state agencies, actually facilitating that. And then the identity providers. So right now we have state-based identity providers in this solution. And in future, we are planning to open that for the commercial identity providers as the solution matures. So here's the technical architecture, and now we'll just keep it very brief. As you can see in the center, you can see that cloud-shaped thing, which is our identity exchange solution. It has identity broker services as well as the web services icon, which you can see that is actually facilitating communication with the attribute verifiers on the right hand side. On the orange color thing is the identity provider, where the only one identity provider we have right now, but in future we're going to extend that to include more. And the green box is where the relying party is. So what we are building as part of this solution is the agent or interceptor which will receive the SAML assertion and then provide it to the relying party. And then relying party will be able to map that to their local data source and be able to resolve that identity. Okay. And here is our plan for future. So pilot is where we are building this identity provider, identity exchange solution. All the participants right now are internal to Commonwealth of Pennsylvania state agencies, plus one private entity, which is Experian, providing attribute verification services. In future, the plan is to introduce more agencies as the relying parties to complete this solution within Pennsylvania, and then introduce external or commercial identity providers. A simple use case. One is the enrollment services, where a citizen's trying to access apply for benefit services, or log into health information exchange portal to record their consent. The first thing they're going to do is they will try to access that application. So it's more of a pull authentication service, where they will first go to the relying party. Relying party will send them back to the exchange, and Exchange will actually redirect them to the provider, where provider will do the enrollment if this is a first-time access, and then go through the identity proofing services. So identity proofing is basically use these internal state-based sources and then go to the Experian for the external attribute verification. Once the verification is done, we are going to store those claims and grant that access or authentication to that user, and then provide that SAML assertion to the relying party. And it's a relying party's responsibility or ownership to really grant whatever access they feel appropriate for that user. So the authentication is what is separated here. Second use case, or this is actually more of a screenshot. So as part of enrollment services, we are going to collect some basic demographic information, but I would like to show you one more thing here is, actually it's not here. But what we have also done is we are allowing user to select and provide information on which attribute verifier they want to use for the verification purpose. So they're going to provide their consent, and they're going to provide the corresponding data. So if they want to use a state-based Department of Transportation for verification, they're going to provide the driver's license, and they're going to provide consent that my information will be sent to Department of Transportation, and then they will provide the claim back to the agency. So there's a consent piece there as well. And this is another use case where the citizen already has a credential, and they will go to obviously the authentication process and send that credential back to the relying party. And if the relying parties thinks that they need a second level of assurance, they're going to actually request that as part of the authentication process. So in some cases, relying party would require that the user comes with the LOA2. We are following actually NIST standards on that. And in addition, they can also request a multi-factor authentication, so which is a one-time password is what we are planning to use. So here's the status. We are right now wrapping up the design, and which is March, and we just submitted the design deliverable, so it's going through the review process. We're going to start the development and testing, and by the end of September, we plan to put this solution in the production.
It was literally a week ago today that we had our design review with the NPO. Okay. Sorry. It was literally a week ago today that we had our design review with the NPO. And comments or feedback we got, I think we're good. Thanks, Scott. The next phase, which we're just starting, is the actual development and testing. We are actually doing some proof of concept already, but moving into that phase. We plan to be live as a pilot basically around September, and then we'll be running the program. Not that we're planning to shut it down, but we'll be running it for an evaluation period of several months after that. No. Yeah. And I'm sorry, this is my first IDESG meeting, and I don't know all the names and faces.
Yeah, I have two related questions. One is, could you explain again what the difference is between the attribute provider and the attribute verifier, and also how does it work when the attributes come from the driver's license? How's that verified?
We are not actually using like motor vehicle as an attribute provider. All the attributes will be provided by the citizen or end user, and they will assert that this is me, here's my driver's license number, address, whatever, and we will verify that against our DMV records.
So you are just going to verify that the driver's license corresponds to the
asserted identity.
To the attribute, that the attributes
match.
But yes. How can you verify that the user has the driver's license? You don't verify that.
Not without having them show up and present it, and some of our program offices do that.
Oh, okay, so you can actually physically go to some agency and they check it and they give you an authorization
Certainly.
code verifying that? Is
If
that
they are applying for certain benefits, they may require a face-to-face interview or whatever you want to consider that.
okay? And as a result of that, they get an author because that has to go online eventually. So they get
Right.
some kind of code or something.
We would put a marker on their user account saying that this was verified by
Oh, okay.
whatever or
Great.
whoever.
Thank you.
How are you going to determine which identity providers to bring into COPA?
That is somewhere in the future. We have
I
not-
noticed you had some samples up there, and given that Pennsylvania is
We
a
have
very
not-
robust federated state already,
Yeah, we have not even discussed it with any of those vendors.
Do you have any attribute providers who will verify income or assets, or do you plan to?
Individual agencies like our Department of Public Welfare, if someone is applying for benefits, they will be verifying, income and eligibility for the whatever program they're applying for.
And what entity will be providing the verification of the income or assets?
That would be internal to those programs. I know, for example, if you're going into the Compass application with the Department of Welfare, they have agreements with the Social Security Administration and State Department of Revenue and so forth. So if you're putting in a copy of your whatever income form, they will verify it.
So, folks in the room, if when you ask a question you could identify yourself by name and affiliation, that would be helpful to the online audience. Also, we have some questions from the chat room that Kay can read, so maybe we should take a few of those now. So here, I'll give
I just have one question, if we could. Otherwise, they have to wait a long time, and they asked a while ago. So the question comes from Jerry Kickinson, and he asked, do agencies, in parentheses, relying parties, ever access attribute verifier?
Not in this, what we are building right now.
Colin Wallace, individual. Frank, can you tell me a little bit about the session state? My sense is that I really want to know, the pattern's quite familiar to me, so that's fine, but it's a matter of whether you're keeping session state in that identity provider as you are moving that stuff around or not, because that's quite a privacy, that there's some privacy implications about tracking where that person is.
If someone presents, say, their driver's license information to us for verification, we will not be storing that as part of the identity provider or in the identity exchange. We will simply be storing a tag or flag that says this was verified, and here's when it was done and how long it's basically good for.
Okay, it's a start, thanks.
Hi, Jim Fenton, individual. At one point, I think you said that you prevented the relying party from knowing which identity provider is providing the credentials. I wonder if you could comment on why that's important.
It's probably more important that the identity provider doesn't know that this is coming in from our Department of Welfare or our Department of Health or...
I agree with that. I
So
just
we're
didn't
kind of
understand
like-
why the relying party had to know whether or not you were using, say, Verizon in one of your examples.
No, but it's possible that some of the identity providers themselves may be associated with a certain area, like a health provider or, say our Department of Public Welfare, we're the identity provider. Some relying party could make some assumptions as to why I have an identity over in welfare, or so we're looking at it as being a double blind and trying to isolate everyone as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Frank.